Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Working Tools Masonic Podcast. I'm your host, Connor Massey, a Master Mason and Mark Master Mason from Victoria, British Columbia. With me, of course, is Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung, my colleague. The computer made noise, sorry. With me is my co-host and friend, Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung. And of course, today we're super excited to have with us Most Worshipful Brother Barry Burch, who is the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. Now, I'll introduce him properly in a minute, but it's important to specify that our opinions are our own and by no means represent the opinions of our lodges or Grand Lodges. So, with that said, I've been given a write-up, and I'm not going to read it all. I've been told that I don't have to, but I'll read a little bit about our Most Worshipful Grand Master. Most Worshipful Brother Barry Burch was born in Winnipeg in 1946. Quickly realizing that the West Coast was far more hospitable, at the age of 3 months, he opted to grow up in Victoria. During his years at Esquimalt High School, he served in the Royal Canadian Navy Reserve. Academically, he has earned a bachelor's degree at the University of Victoria, a master's degree from Western Washington University in Education, and a diploma in public administration, also from UVic. Most Worshipful Brother Burch was initiated, passed, and raised in the Duke of Connaught Lodge in North Vancouver in 1988, serving as Worshipful Master in 1996. He served Grand Lodge as District Education Officer, Regional Representative, District Deputy Grand Master on a number of Grand Lodge committees, and in the best job in the jurisdiction as Grand Director of Ceremonies. In addition, he has served over 15 years in a variety of roles in BC Job's Daughters, culminating as the Associate Grand Guardian in 2005, and he received the DeMolay Legion Honor, being dubbed by a rather bearded past Master Counselor, that is, in 2018. An avid sportsman, he played North American sports, excelling at basketball, fast-pitch softball, field hockey. His interests include lame attempts at maintaining fitness, golf when he can, though clearly not enough, musical theater, an audience member only, which in my opinion is wonderfully unfortunate, and feeding an eclectic taste in music, and of course spoiling his grandchildren. Without a doubt, his smartest decision was marrying Anne, the lovely chief, in 1984, and they have 2 daughters, both of which are past honored queens of Job Daughters, and 2 grandchildren. So with that said, Steve and I are incredibly excited to introduce and welcome Most Worshipful Brother Barry Burch.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Brother Massey, Brother Chung. It's always engaging to have your bio read exactly the way you wrote it, so I appreciate that. And part of the reason why we set things up that way is we all take Freemasonry seriously, and we work hard at being Freemasons, but we ought not to take ourselves seriously. So that's kind of the way that I try to communicate that to the brothers. So this afternoon, actually, I guess it is, what I wanted to talk about a little bit with everyone was how we've gone about setting up our plan here for the next several years. And one of the things that you don't get a chance to do when you're speaking to brethren in a lodge is you don't really get a chance to get into an in-depth, sort of an in-depth review of why you have chosen to go in a certain direction. So, excuse me. So let me see if I can make this screen share thing work. And now, if the instruction you gave me earlier is correct, you should see, change what I'm going to do here. You should see this, join our pledge to build a stronger craft. Is that what you're seeing there?
We're not seeing it yet.
Oh. So have I done something wrong here? Screen share. try this again. Start screen share.
There we go.
Oh.
So you're seeing the hands?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So just by way of explanation, so this is this is for the British Columbia and Yukon, and what became apparent to me was we've had over the years some absolutely wonderful grandmasters who have worked really hard to build the craft, and we have been making some progress. The thing that I noticed, however, was that a lot of good ideas didn't tend to carry on much after a particular grandmaster's year. And in our jurisdiction, traditionally, grandmasters have had a yearly theme, if you will. And so the thought struck me that some of the things that we need to do to make the improvements in Freemasonry that I think we all want take a little longer than a year. And some of them take a lot longer than a year. And so I had a conversation with the Grandmaster of the day when I was Deputy Grandmaster, and that's Most Worshipful Brother Ron Yates. And I explained to him my idea of how I thought we could proceed in subsequent years. And to his credit, he gave me the license to go ahead and start to work on this idea. And so I spoke with the then senior Grand Warden, Right Worshipful Brother Doug Franklin, and the junior Grand Warden, Right Worshipful Brother Don McKenzie, and basically shared the idea that why don't we the three of us, work together for the next 3 years on a program that all three of us can support. So rather than for what you frequently hear sometimes from other jurisdictions, my year, my way, what we were looking for was 3 years the same way, in essence. And so this is kind of the guiding image, if you will. That was produced for us by a brother here in British Columbia, Wilson Beckett. So very simply, we're staying the course for the next 3 years, and we're focused essentially on two things: improving the quality of Freemasonry that each one of us experiences in our lodge, and we're also focused on raising the profile of Freemasonry in our communities. It's our belief that there are thousands of men in British Columbia and Yukon who are looking for exactly what Freemasonry has to offer, but they have no idea. They have no idea that we exist. So that, in essence, is what our 3-year plan is, and basically we're asking brethren to apply the tools. You can see at the bottom of the image there, civility, which is one of the programs that we run here in British Columbia and Yukon, and obviously spelled out by the working tools. And we could have a field day, maybe in a future podcast, of going over each of those tools and discussing them in some depth. I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. So that, in essence, is what we're trying to accomplish here for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Quality of Freemasonry in our lodges and raise the profile of Freemasonry. Those are the two areas. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, yeah, those are pretty broad terms. Could it not be more specific? Well, they were chosen and written that way intentionally because each one of us, I think, could see ways that we think we could improve the quality of Freemasonry that we experience in our lodges. For example, there's a lot of different ways to do that, and different lodges have different approaches. So that's in essence why that kind of those broad categories were created.
So you've set this, or you, Right Worshipful Brothers, Mackenzie and Franklin have set this this incredible goal that you're hoping to achieve over the next 3 years.
Correct.
How are you going about reaching those goals?
Well, excellent question, Connor. And we came to the Grand Lodge communication last June when we were installed in our current offices now, and we decided that we wanted to come with the tools to make this actually happen. And so hence, apply our tools. We have the tools, not only the working tools that you see in civility, but also the capability of examining how Freemasonry is currently working for each and every one of us. So we went about, let's see if I can get this to change the screen here to the Lodge Health Assessment. Okay, that's not working. So do I have to get out of this image to get to the next one?
I would, on the left-hand side of your screen, it looks like number 5 is highlighted. If you want to change it to number 6, just click on the image beside the number 6.
Okay. Actually, I was trying to get to number 8 here.
Yeah.
Then yeah, just click on number 8.
Yeah, I'm doing that. It's not happening.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Try using the directional keypads, like the left and right buttons.
It's not working either.
Try hitting.
I don't see his mouse anywhere.
Try hitting escape.
Yeah. Well,
there you are again.
There I am. How thrilling. So let me try this. See if I can go back in and see if I can get.
There we go. I see your mouse now.
There we are.
Yep.
Lodge Health Assessment. Is that what you're seeing?
Yep.
Okay. So how we've gone about doing this is we've essentially asked every brother in the jurisdiction to think about how their lodge is operating, and is it functioning the way you want it to function? Are you gaining from your lodge what you need to become a better Freemason, in essence, is really what we wanted brethren to consider. So rather than have brothers do that individually and come to their own conclusions, we actually, I worked with a group of brothers for almost 2 years to create what we call the Lodge Health Assessment. And in essence, what this is it's an examination. It's a competency-based examination of how your lodge is functioning. So we opted to have this as a group activity, and many lodges undertook this process with the members of their lodge, and we examined. Again, are we seeing the 7 competencies there?
Yes.
Yep.
Good. So we basically asked all the brethren of the lodge to get together and examine their lodge on these 7 competencies. And very quickly, lodge management basically speaks to is it well organized, or are we Is our finances in good shape? Are we meeting all of our obligations according to the Constitution and regulations? Sustainability planning, to be a bit flippant about this, is our planning horizon longer than the next meeting? Do we have a longer term plan to sustain our lodge or make improvements where we need it? There are a lot of lodges do a lot of really, really good things in this area, but my experience is that most lodges are kind of operating from meeting to meeting. Fellowship, I think.
I know that when we did this, that the questions that were asked made us really think about the things that we should be thinking about in getting our lodges prepared to move forward over the next decade with growth.
Well, again, with the sustainability planning, what we wanted that's exactly what we wanted to have happen is brethren that have been in the lodge for some time and may have thought they maybe could have done a little bit better, or newer brethren who were looking for a longer term commitment from their lodge to make a longer term commitment to the lodge, if you understand the significance there. That's what we hoped would come out of that. And Stephen, I've heard this comment a number of times from brothers. We kind of talk about it, but we never actually did anything about it. So fellowship, when you read Masonic surveys, and a lot of this is based on a lot of research that I did after I was elected as Junior Grand Warden in June of 2015. I read a lot of Masonic surveys, and there's two things that are the initial draw for brothers. One is fellowship, and the other is education or enlightenment. Of the two, fellowship is the one that's more pronounced. And so if a new brother is not feeling the love in the lodge, this is a big problem. So there were, and for each of these competencies, there were 4 to 6 different questions that teased out the reality in the lodge. Again, education, Masonic education, learning about the craft, learning about yourself in the craft. Important part of that, the competency of community engagement, is literally how relevant are you to your community? What are you doing to support the community? Every Freemason's lodge ought to be making some kind of community contribution. So there were a number of questions on that. Charity, in the broadest sense of that word, charity doesn't mean reaching into your pocket and pulling out $50 to put in the pot. It really is that charitable feeling that Freemasons should acquire to help others that need us to help them, and that's not always money. In fact, we're trying to encourage lodges to provide service, where need is, will lay hold with dispassionate courage. And the Masonic experience basically is how are all these things in balance? Are we, some lodges are really good at some things and not so good at others. So this was kind of a catch-all thing. So out of all of that, each lodge received an assessment based on the input of their brethren, which identified relative strengths and weaknesses. And hopefully, I don't know why this is not coming up intuitively.
Try to go to your top left corner of the blue picture and click on the yellow circle to minimize it, and maybe it'll bring up what you're trying to bring up.
Okay, yeah, I'm not actually seeing that anywhere. We'll try this. Oh, it's gone now.
There you go.
So that's live. There we go.
There we are. So what we've ended up with, and this is the rank average of competency scores across the jurisdiction. So what we have is 122 out of 134 lodges participated in this process. So each of those lodges, and scores is the wrong term, it's actually values. The values for each lodge were then put together and averaged out so that each district had a overall value that comprised of all 7 of those competencies. And those districts were then averaged out, and here's the overall competency values for the jurisdiction. And what's interesting, the relative values, of course, are important, but it's the comparison between them that I find most intriguing. And the areas that we most frequently hear about that are problematic for brothers who are considering walking away from the craft is, I'm not feeling the love here of the brothers. The fellowship is not readily apparent to me, and I thought I would learn more about Freemasonry and thereby learn more about myself. So, fellowship and education are not highly rated by the brethren in their lodges. So what each lodge would receive, and I haven't been able to create this image. I'm not very good at this stuff, but each lodge would see an outcome like this, where each of those 7 competencies would be ranked for their particular lodge. So the idea here again is that we want brethren to engage in their lodge, to look at how their lodge is operating, provide feedback to their worshipful master, who receives this report, and then basically the lodge, what we hope will happen is the lodge will look at this and say, we need to make some improvements here, and here are the 2 or 3 areas that we want to focus in on for the next couple of years. So that's in essence what this is. So if you go back to the start of this whole continuum, we want brethren to be engaged in the lodge, to identify what's most important to them, to their lodge, and then hopefully the lodge will go about making those improvements that have been identified.
Well, it kind of had that effect. Somewhat in a roundabout way in our lodge, we received this collective report that you guys had sent back and went through it in our lodge as was requested. And I was really glad that it was requested that it was, particularly read out rather than just passed around, because it did strike up conversation, and the brethren that were not feeling the love of education had specifically said, I'm not getting the kind of education I thought I was going to get. And that made me think deeply on, well, how do we get that to them? And then other things have come up, which we can talk about later. Pardon me, that I explained we've now got going and are working on. But this was a great thing that you did.
Well, this is a pretty dramatic departure for our jurisdiction. Now we've had surveys done in the past But what has happened? We've got this data, and I mean, I've looked at it. I've had access to it for a few years now. But most brethren don't see that. You do a survey, particularly a craft-based thing, and you may or may not see the results. Well, the beauty of this system is why it took so long to put together, is that the feedback is instantaneous. Mm-hmm. So if you do this process online, and it's capable of doing that, you basically, as you complete each competency, you answer all the questions, your value comes up right away. So there you are, you've done it, and here's the value that we have in this particular competency. And so that was to me, it was one of the most exciting parts about this, that your feedback is instantaneous. The master now has all of this information, and now you can start to break it down and look at some detail here and start to work on making improvements if you so choose.
Absolutely. So you've clearly put a lot of work. Well, you and the other people on the Grand Line have clearly put a lot of work into this. And I have a question that I want to ask, but first I have a story, and I think I was telling you about this earlier. When Henderson Lodge did our lodge health assessment, we were going over it, and if I remember correctly, one of the questions is about, has 10 members of your lodge visited in the last month? And when we were doing that, everyone looked at me, because I visit a lot. I try to go to every lodge that I can, because I'm only slightly obsessed with Freemasonry. And the Worshipful Master piped up and said, "Now, Connor, it says 10 people, not one person 10 times."
Yeah.
So what inspired you originally to choose to run for the Grand Line? Because like, this is clearly a lot of work, and you've put and you continue and are continuing to put in a lot of work. So what stroke of madness, I suppose, inspired you to put your name forward for the junior Grand Warden's position?
Well, you know, I don't want to sound this too self-aggrandizing, but it just I was watching the craft kind of dissipate in front of my eyes.
Can we unscreen share that? So we can see Barry.
Oh, okay. Hang on. So I unscreen share.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. It'll scare a lot of people away now that my face is back, I'm sure. Yeah, so as I was saying, I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back here, but I was watching the craft literally dissipate in front of me. You know, we've had a declining membership situation for some time, and I thought, I have some unique background and experience that I could see how it could be applied in the craft. And so in essence, really what prompted me is I thought my background and experience applied in the right way could conceivably make a difference. So that was, in essence, that was the motivation to move forward. I've done a lot of community development work, strategic planning work. I was involved in advertising and promotion in my professional career, and then when I retired in 2006, I actually consulted internationally on a lot of these same areas. So, you know, I think we can package these things up in such a way that and make it practical and useful, and have brethren think about how they view Freemasonry, what it means to them, what's important to them, and how motivated appropriately they could reinvest, if you like, in the craft. And despite my experience with my personal financial portfolio, most of us, if we make an investment, we get a good return. So that was a little finance planning joke I made there about my financial planning expertise. But in terms of the craft, you make an investment in a craft. We all know this. You make the investment, the time and energy, it comes back to you. And so what I really was trying to do is package a way that we could identify what brethren felt they needed, and then give them an avenue that would allow them to reinvest or invest for the first time in the craft. So that was the motivation.
That's awesome. Do you guys have, the three of you, a plan to follow up this survey with another tool to, have us, revisit that in the coming year and 2 years?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, and let me see if I can. Where did that screen share thing go? If I can pull up the next. Oh, there we are. The next visual.
There we go.
Let me see. I did record the numbers here. Sorry about that. I can recognize it here. There we go. We're seeing that one, the 3-year Lodge Strategic Planning Workbook, right?
Yep.
You see that? Okay. So I worked with one group for a couple of years. There were 4 of us that worked on the Lodge health assessment process. Then there was another group that I worked with. Again, there were 4 of us that worked for about 18 months to just exactly as you've pointed out, Stephen. The Lodge health assessment results are illustrative, useful, but if you don't do anything with it, it's not going to make any difference. So my experience over the last almost 4 years now, almost 5 years now, because I was Grand Director of Ceremonies before I ran for the Grand South. So I've had 4.5 years of visiting lodges. And what I observed is lots and lots of well-meaning masters, but not necessarily people that had the experience of planning in a more formal sense. So this other group and I worked on how you could take those Lodge health assessment results, identify the areas that you wanted to work on, and then actually build a plan to make it happen. And so what we have here is basically our workbook, and there are three planning options here. The third one is the full meal deal. What you would probably use, it's almost industry standard, and there are some in our craft who are used to this kind of planning process and would make use of it. But really, the first 2 are the ones where most lodges are going to probably invest their time, and it's basically a template, a step-by-step process. Identify the issue you want to work on, and it goes on a step-by-step basis through that process. So you can literally build your plan. And the idea here is that this doesn't need to be a committee of the whole. It can be a subcommittee, 2 or 3 brothers, the principal officers of the lodge, however the lodge decides, can just go through that process, so that, again, what you end up with is a plan to make the improvements that the brethren have identified.
So, speaking of identifying, like Connor, I visit a lot. When all these things got back sent to all of the lodges, they were all read out in all the lodges I went and visited. Nothing has been discussed or seen of since in any of them, by any of them. So what I'm referring to is, do you guys have like a follow-up plan to maybe, send another correspondence out to the lodges to get them, to give them a little nudge and get them working on that? Because the only thing I've seen so far that has really come from that is a few brothers that have gotten inspired by it to do a few things on their own.
Well, I should have mentioned this right at the beginning. The mechanism for implementation of the lodge health assessment and the strategic planning process all goes through the district deputy grand master. And the district deputy has, we had 122 and 134 lodges participate in lodge health assessment. So in mid-January, this planning process then was released to the DDGMs, and their role was to help implement this through their districts and communicate with all their lodges. And in some cases, the district deputies themselves are, when they're making appearances in their lodges, are emphasizing the importance of working through this process. So I don't know when you were in the lodges, but I would hope if you were out and about now, you would see more of the lodges actively engaging in the planning process.
Let me see. I'm on average between 2 and 4 meetings a week.
Okay.
And I haven't seen it. That's why I asked.
Well, I know which district you're in, so I'll be talking to the DDGMs right after this podcast, because that's, the information, as you say, the health assessment is useful. If nothing comes of it, it's nice to have, but it's not going to make a difference. It's actually, the brethren actually have to invest some time and energy in making the improvements. So
yeah, and there's it has been influential in helping me do a few of the things that we're trying to do with respect to the education and enlightenment for the guys, because that's what they've been asking for, and that's what was identified when we got the review. So that's been pretty good in that sense. I just thought it was so good; it deserved more follow-up somehow.
Yep. Well, it's something. When I go to district visits, I do PowerPoint. I use some of the same slides that I'm using here today, and specifically talk about the next steps. And again, I'm relying on the district deputies to make sure that this is happening. One of the observations that I've made over the years is that there's a lot of really, really good programs that are in place, that have been created, and not just stuff that we've created in BC and Yukon, but we've brought in programs from other jurisdictions that are really, really well thought out, adapted them for our needs, and have made them available. And they're wonderful things to do, but if lodges choose not to use them, there's not much you can do. And so what I wanted to do, actually, to go back, is something I should have mentioned earlier when Connor asked me the question, what motivated me to move forward, was, again, I thought I could do something. I wanted some mechanisms that would make things happen for the brethren. And really, what I decided at the time is I'd rather try and make a difference and fail than do nothing and be successful. And so, and that's not a shot at past grandmasters at all. It's It was really what motivated me. So, the next step, this lodge strategic planning piece is the key.
Yes, I'm so glad that you've incorporated a 3-year plan with that with your successors, because quite often, in our lodge settings, one worshipful master will implement something and it'll be successful for the term that he's in, and frequently the successors have their own agendas and don't carry on other practices that were implemented the year before. And so having the 3 guys, back to back to back, all on the same page, I think is so valuable.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to there we are. I'm trying to unscreen. Thank you, Connor. Again, it's really important that everyone understands that this is not. I've been drinking special Kool-Aid, and I've had insights that other grandmasters haven't had in the past. We are where we are, and we were in a position where we could move in a more strategic way because of what has gone previously. The table was set for us by past grandmasters, and when I originally proposed this idea to then senior grand warden and junior grand warden, immediately it just resonated almost right off the hop. So, we're in a process. We're in a 3-year process. So, what I'm hoping is we had 122 lodges participate in lodge health assessment, and every one of them engages in a focused strategic plan. Realistically, there will be some fall off, I'm pretty sure. But I've asked the DDGMs to stay with this and to keep the pot boiling. And, before this Masonic year is over, I'm looking for a count of how many lodges have engaged. And if it's not very many, I'm going to report it.
Right.
Because that's what we're trying to do. Now, the other part of this is I'm in this for the next 3 years. So when the Grand Master-elect, Right Worshipful Brother Franklin, gets installed, the day after he's installed, he has a job for me to do that continues the 3-year plan. And I'll be doing that for his year. And if the next Grand Master wants me to stay in that job, I'll continue to do that job. So we're in this, all 3 of us are in this for the next 3 years.
That's awesome. Yeah. Have you guys made it available, the tools that come along with this Grand Lodge assessment and the suggestions? Have you guys made that available on the Grand Lodge website so that, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, guys who are coming in and hear little bits and pieces can access that and make use of those tools? Because, it's one of the things that, like this podcast that we have now started, we may not have a lot of viewers right now, but as they grow, they all tend to start at the beginning and watch through. And when they get to this episode and they go, oh, wow, that's a cool thing. Hopefully they have access to these things.
Well, after brethren do this podcast, probably the entire internet will crash because your Grand Master is on screen. Yeah, right. The process, the Lodge Health Assessment process, continues for the next 3 years. So the committee, the guys that put this together, by the way, they all work in the industry. This is what they do for a living. Right. So they've donated all of their professional time to put this together. They have said that if lodges want to do this every 6 months for the next 3 years, the system is there and you can use it.
Awesome.
So minimally, what we hope will happen. That was a very good question, Stephen. Thank you. I should have mentioned this earlier. What we're hoping is every September, minimally every September, lodges will go back redo the lodge health assessment, and be able to gauge from the original baseline the progress that they're making. Now, if the lodge doesn't do anything about it, it's probably not going to change. But for those that invest the time and energy to do a bit of planning and a bit of work, they'll get feedback from the brethren as to whether or not their ideas are moving forward in the areas identified. So it's a closed loop process. That's
pretty cool. We were discussing earlier in our blue room the enlightenment, the more light night that we're doing in our lodge, and we are making that available in our district and to our neighboring district. And maybe not all the lodges have had the time or resources or somebody willing able to put that together. But if that can be simply adopted and is successful, we're hoping that by sharing that program through with yourself and making it available through the Grand Lodge to the membership, that it can be adopted in other areas. Because I know that when we discussed the survey and the topic of education, typically in our lodge meetings, where we come and we pay the bills and we do the minutes and things like that, and we have our lodge education officer, he reads a passage or something that was put together, and then lodge is dispersed, and we go, and there's no other thought given to it, and they were wanting more. So hopefully this falls in line with the rest of everything and is complementary and can be adopted, and adjusted as necessary. I mean, I understand that the things like the 6-step program have now been revised to be referred to as the steps to initiation by Worshipful Brother Salt, and resubmitted to be more streamlined because it needed to be tweaked. And I think it's improvements like that by the membership that make a difference. It's now made it easier for some lodges to implement that process with respect to the steps to initiation. So hopefully we can see a lot more of those kinds of initiatives come out from as a result of these types of things.
Well, one of the things that you've identified here, Stephen, is that, and one of the primary motivations for having an extended focus, the 3-year plan, is that if you do something once, you learn a lot about what you have just done. If you do it again, you'll be better at it, and you'll see some opportunities for improvement. And so you've identified exactly what are the other reasons for this extended time frame. We do have a link on our web page called Successful and Best Practices. And that's where, when we've identified things that work really, really well, we put it on that site, and the idea is that brethren can go there and take a look. And if you're thinking about doing a particular kind of an event or an outreach or something like that, what we hope will happen is over time, we'll have every conceivable kind of Masonic activity in there, a best practice, somebody that's put it together, a lodge that's put it together. It was successful. They identified why it was successful. They identified what they did to make it successful. And here's how it works. Here's how it was set up. And here's who you can contact if you want to ask any questions about how you could replicate that. And the idea,
awesome.
And the idea is it's not a theoretical exercise. These are things that have actually happened in our jurisdiction. So is that on the main page of the site? Yes. It's on our once you land on the page, you'll see it, Successful and Best Practices, over in the lower left-hand corner.
That'll be, I'm so looking forward to that site being, I know that the redoing of the site is being done now, and so that it's on a mobile friendly platform and so on. because right now I do most of the stuff on my smartphone, and I get panning around. That's not the easiest thing to do. So that'll be nice. Have things like the text messaging program been put in there and so on?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
That is continuing to gain so much steam, along with the calendar. I've again, every once in a while, I don't hear anything about these two things, and then somebody says, "You know what? I need that link. I changed phones, and I can't get my phone on the calendar, and it's driving me nuts."
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, the main purpose for my efforts into the calendar really have paid off this year. For those who don't know, there are in our District 9, we have a Masonic calendar that is hosted by the Grand Lodge's website, and it's a Google calendar. And I manage that calendar for our district, and I put everything in there: the meetings for the Scottish Rite, the meetings for the Rose Croix, the Shriners. If they've given me their information, it goes in there. And we just avoided our district education day being booked the same day as Grand Chapter was going to have something. And because, to have booking conflicts is so frustrating for Masons, because, they do want to go to the important things. And when you got two really important things at the same time, now they're conflicted as to which one do I go to, right? And so I was really glad to hear that success story this past month, and to hear other things like the text message program guys come back, and more people are asking to be put onto the messages, right? So it's things like that that I hope of getting into that best practices.
Yeah. Well, it's populated. There's an email address there. If you've got a best practice, you send the email. That comes to me because I'm kind of overseeing that. And we edit things, and I might ask a few questions just to clarify, and then bang, up it goes, and it becomes. And the other part of the Lodge Health Assessment, again, I appreciate the question, is the top 10 lodges in terms of value in each of those 7 competencies were asked by the district deputy to submit what it was that they did to be so, to have the brethren have such a high value for community engagement, for example. So the 10 lodges that had the highest value in that competency were asked to submit what it was that they were doing. And, some did, not all, but some did. So those will eventually appear in the successful and best practices. So when you get down to the point of, well, what are we going to do to improve our community engagement? Well, let's go to successful and best practices. And hopefully there'll be 10 examples there.
So a question that I have for you, most worshipful brother. So you've been, your year as Grand Master is coming to an end, kind of soonish.
Say it ain't so. Oh.
You've got a few more months left, a few more times that you can walk across the strait before you have to start taking the boat again.
Yes.
Is there anything that happened during your year, or anything that has been the case, that when you were running for Junior Grand Warden, or even when you were Junior Grand Warden, Senior Grand Warden, and Deputy Grand Master, that you weren't expecting? Like, has there been anything that it was really unexpected about being Grand Master? I guess it's the easiest way for me to say that.
Well, yes, yeah. I think every Grand Master would say yes. What most brethren don't know, and even when you're a Grand Line officer, you don't know a lot of things that go on when you, the day after you become Grand Master, figuratively, a large file lands on your desk full of a whole bunch of stuff that in many cases, is extremely disappointing. Conflicts between brothers, sometimes between lodges, totally inappropriate behavior that takes place. Brethren that aren't really acting as Freemasons. Many in our jurisdiction know that, last Masonic year we had a fairly major Masonic trial that resulted in some fairly lengthy suspensions for brothers. I can tell you that there are a whole, there are a number of those things that happen on a fairly regular basis that, as Grand Master, you are aware of and to a greater or lesser extent have to participate in. That to me was probably the biggest surprise. I mean, we're an organization of human beings, and so we're all human, and we are all also subject to our own foibles and failures. And I mean, I understand that. I mean, I was a manager of people for 30 years and a consultant for 10 or 12. So, I know that the human condition can be challenging sometimes. I honestly didn't expect the extent of those kind of conflicts to be part of Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. And it's the most disappointing part. So, when people ask me, what's it like to be Grand Master? My response is one word: real. It's real.
Right.
There's some really, really, really wonderful, by and large, there's some really, really wonderful Masonic experiences that you have when you're serving the craft, and not just as Grand Master, but when you're a master of a lodge or a grand committee chair or a district deputy or a Grand Lodge appointee. There's some really wonderful moments that come with that.
And wonderful moments is probably a great way to do a wrap up of our conversation, because I'm connected to your Facebook page, so I see the travels and the posts that you make so far along your year, and it seems there's been lots of wonderful moments. And maybe it'd be great if you could touch on some really unique ones that stand out as being exceptional for you.
Well, when you visit districts, and I've had the good fortune in my previous career, I've worked in virtually every community in BC and a few in Yukon. So, there are places that I've been before. But when you go to our jurisdiction, you travel the jurisdiction, we're all Freemasons, and the fundamentals are all the same. The flavor and the application of Freemasonry differs when you travel around. Freemasonry on the island is different than the mainland, which is different in the Okanagan, which is different in the Kootenays, which is different in the north, and it's really different in Yukon. And it's all good. They're all good. And so I think one of the loveliest realizations that you take is that you realize, just like that old talk about religious faith, there's 100 paths at the base of a mountain, but when you get to the summit, they all come together. And really, in our jurisdiction, we have some substantial regional differences, geographically, economically, socially. The common thread through the craft is that we're all brothers. How that manifests itself is different depending on which part of the province you're in. But the differences are all good, and it really broadens your understanding. And I've encouraged brothers to try to travel and visit outside of their own district. And for the Lower Mainland guys, to go north or east of Hope, because it's different. Freemasonry is different, and it really broadens your take.
So, as you're a past associate grand guardian of Job's daughters, I'd like to quote one of the other past associate grand guardians. That would be Mr. Chris Crota. And when he was associate grand guardian, there was something he always said, that there was never a hope that he would go that far east. So
he's way more profound than me. So,
so I've got one last question for you from my end. But before I ask that question, I just want to, if there's anyone watching in our comments right now, if you have any questions for the Grand Master before we end this episode, please post those in the live chat, and we can bring them to his attention. But first of all, I know what the highlight of your year has been so far. It's when I hit you on the head with a sword, right?
There you are.
Yeah.
That was very nice. That was a nice moment.
That's when I dubbed him an honorary Legion of Honor, which was one of my proudest moments of the year as well. So my question for you is for all of those watching, be it live or be it after the fact, do you have any advice for anyone who is interested in going into the Grand Line and running for eventually becoming Grand Master, or to a lesser, well, not a lesser extent, but to an equal extent, be running for Provincial Master Counselor of BC&Y, or First Grand Principal of Royal Arch, or President of the Rotary Club, like that sort of, any advice that you have for people who are aspiring to roles of leadership?
Well, I would say that really I think where your motivation should lie is, first and foremost, do you have a passion and a love for the organization of which you are a member? Do you have a belief in your background, your interests, your skills? Do you have a belief that those can be useful and applicable? And do you believe that background, skills, and interests can make a difference? If you believe in those areas, by all means, take the steps. Not all of us are. Not all of us have that inner self-confidence to put ourselves forward. But if you just examine your organization and, let's say, take a look and see how you believe you could make a difference. If you believe you can make a difference, that should be the motivation to take that next step. And in our organization, being elected by your brothers to serve is a pretty empowering moment. But you really do have to think about it carefully, because if you don't have all of those ingredients and you do get elected, the one thing you don't want to do is you never want to disappoint your brothers. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, sometimes people think, yes, it'd be pretty nice. I get to wear a fancy apron and a collar, and I get a title in the end, and on all that sort of thing. Sometimes you can get distracted by the bells and whistles, and it's just, critical self-assessment. And for me, I mean, the big thing for me is, if you believe you can make a difference, then take the step.
Fantastic. Well, I haven't seen anything in the comments for questions for the Grand Master. So, Steve, is there anything else you want to say?
I just want to thank the Grand Master for agreeing to come on our podcast and experience his first podcast with us in a large atmosphere, and welcome him back. The honor has been ours to have you with us. We know that your time is very valuable and very consumed these days, so we appreciate you making the time for us. And if once you have more time and would like to come back on, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to have you back anytime.
After Grand Lodge, you should come out to Victoria. We can go golfing, because I know you don't get to do that enough. And then you can come on a podcast and talk about what it's like to be the immediate past Grandmaster.
Well, there might be one more thing that could be very interesting if we were able to get permission to run a podcast live at Grand Lodge. Might be more reason for me to get there.
There you go.
Well, I'm all in. I'm all in for taking advantage of the technology that exists. We've been moving committee meetings onto Zoom, face to face, online, to overcome some of the geographical challenges that we have in our organization. I see the day when brethren that may not be able to attend lodge are able to engage with their lodge because of that technological connection. So, a podcast from Grand Lodge Communication would be phenomenal.
If I can say something, Grandmaster, when I was provincial master counselor for BC&Y, there was one brother who was super, super sick, but he still wanted to be involved at a meeting. So I had spoken with our executive officer and the rest of DMLA, and we gave permission for him to actually Skype into the meeting. So he was in bed sick, but he was still able to be at the meeting, not in person. So that just made me think of that.
Yeah. Well,
but with that said, is there any last remarks you want to make, Grandmaster?
Just, this is, again, my first experience, as Steve noted. I've heard about podcasts, never participated in one, let alone actually viewed one before. I mean, this is a remarkable avenue for communication and thinking in terms of some practical outcomes. The title of your podcast, Working Tools, is perfect. It's absolutely perfect for brethren to engage and have conversations that add some depth and breadth to their Freemasonry that they may not otherwise get through their lodge. And my big thing is we don't want to lose the brothers that we have. And so we have to make sure that we're engaging our brothers in their Freemasonry. That's elevating the quality of Freemasonry they experience, so that we keep them in long enough that they really start to get the true benefits of Freemasonry, because it doesn't happen instantaneously. You got to stay with this for a few years. Some of us take longer than others to finally grasp what it means to be a brother in this craft. So any mechanism that we can use that keeps the brethren engaged until they get to that point, where then Freemasonry will become self-sustaining during their lifetime. That's any mechanism that we can use is worth pursuing. And I congratulate you for putting this together, because this is another great avenue to do that.
Well,
so with that, my brothers, thank you so much for having me on, and we'll look forward to hearing about more podcasts in the future.
Definitely. Well, with that said, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. A big thanks to the Most Worshipful Grand Master for joining us, as my colleague Steve had said. If you enjoyed watching this episode today, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you get up-to-date information on when we are going live, and follow us on Facebook. The link is down below. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, brother and all, thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.